Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the next session. As was pointed out by Catherine, this is a fireside chat with the CEO of Invest Canada, Laurel Broten. Very good to see you. Thank you very much for the applause. Our fan. Yeah. Just before we begin, Laura, I want to thank the Toronto Global Forum for inviting me back here today to be a facilitator. It's not often you walk into a room in Toronto that has former premiers, former cabinet ministers, former ambassadors from the United States to Canada, and everybody who really counts in terms of setting up public policy. And I'm a former as well. And Laurel, you're a former cabinet minister. And I ask you to figure out which party we are based upon how we're dressed today. Not hard to understand or figure out. Sorry, I'm playing with my mic because that's better. So Laurel, why don't you tell us a little bit about Invest Canada and what it does?
Sure. Well, it's great to be back at Toronto Global Forum as well. It was one of the first events that I did this time last year when I came on board as CEO of Invest in Canada, which is Canada's national investment attraction and promotion agency. So we do investment attraction. We target prospects. We talk to them about the value propositions across the country. We do large scale global advertising campaigns to raise awareness of Canada as a place to invest. And we also collect and share intelligence and share that across the country so that if you're talking to one part of the country or you're talking to us, it really is consistent in terms of the value proposition with really regional details. And, you know, we're both tied to Atlantic Canada as an example, and we really need to know that part of the world at Invest in Canada as one example to be able to market the opportunities that exist there.
And why is foreign direct investment so important to Canada?
So foreign direct investment, we know from, data and research that it is a mechanism whereby significant capital comes into the country. We know that that capital comes in with innovation and ideas, and it drives us forward, as a country. We have a long history in Canada of being open to foreign direct investment. And we are seeing that continue now, I think, in a very robust way as we reimagine our economy. And that's been the theme of the morning, really, and perhaps the theme of the last number of years. We need to reimagine our economy. And that means we need to invest in it to take it to the next level. And so electric vehicles, as an example. Big topic of conversation, very important for Ontario. And I spent many, many years here. Much of the resource that is coming in to transform that industry is foreign direct investment. LG Stellantis, a file that we worked on at Invest in Canada, is one example of that.
Yeah. So what we're talking about today at the Toronto Global Forum is about energy transition. Clearly, because Invest in Canada is, I guess, a part of the government of Canada in a sense. And the government of Canada, Canadian culture has decided we're moving very much forward in terms of energy transition. How do you fit in? Like, what are you looking for? And what are you telling the rest of the world about where is Canada in energy transition?
So energy transition is obviously very topical, and I'll share one story. So I've been involved in energy transition probably since birth, as someone who was born in Saskatchewan and grew up in Alberta. And that being said, you know, the topic today, we're a lot talking about CCUS, carbon capture storage. Well, in 2005, with my young infant twins with me, my grandmother, who lived in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, reached out to NCANA and said that my granddaughter is Minister of Environment in Ontario, and you should arrange a private tour for her to come and see CCUS. So it's 2005. I was already on site seeing it. That's an example of the type of subject matter that we're working now on Invest in Canada. So we've got significant opportunities in hydrogen in the East Coast, on the West Coast, in Alberta as well. We are seeing energy transition in terms of CCUS. That's another example. We need to be part of changing our mix in Canada. And I want to pull back for 1 second because, yes, we need to change, and we need to change for greener, cleaner electricity. But we do need to remember that Canada is 83% carbon neutral green energy. And that does stand us apart from other jurisdictions, particularly those that are right to the south of us. And global CEOs are telling us that. I was in Europe last week with the CEO of Rio Tinto talking about the fact that Canada is, significantly ahead of the US when it comes to the green energy. And if you're doing green transition, how is it all tied together? You need green energy to make the batteries for electric vehicles, or else you're really not having a green supply chain. And so that's really one of the advantages that is setting Canada apart right now.
Okay, so that's really interesting, because to say that Canada is ahead of the U.S. when the United States have put into place the Inflation Reduction Act, which, by the way, hasn't reduced inflation. So it's kind of a non sequitur. But the Inflation Reduction Act must be having an impact on where foreign investors are choosing to put their investment. Why are we still doing okay?
So we're still doing great. And what I would say is the Inflation Reduction Act, absolutely. It's a game changer. But one of the things that it did is it brought attention to North America. So when we're talking to European investors, they were not really looking at North America. So the Inflation Reduction Act made them think, okay, we should think about North America. Then what did they do? They started looking, where can I have a site? Where can I get skilled workers today? Where can I get skilled workers tomorrow? What's the immigration strategy of that location and that country so that I know I will have a pipeline in the future? What does the electricity mix look like? How green is it? And so we, despite the Inflation Reduction Act, have landed significant investments in areas that the Inflation Reduction Act is targeting. And we have investors that are saying really Canada is having its moment because we have the critical minerals, we have the skilled workforce, we have an educated workforce, we have an innovative economy where universities and that part of the world is playing part of developing those solutions. And we have green energy, as part of that puzzle.
So how would you say we're doing right now?
Listen, I think Canada is having its moment. I've been in this role a year. I've traveled across the country and frankly around the world. And we are having a moment in terms of the attention that Canada is giving. I know that when you were Minister of Natural Resources, I have Minister of Environment. We were talking about ESG a long time ago in Canada. That is integral to what is happening now. So there are parts of the world where they don't have that ESG lens on the infrastructure that they've built, on the way they approach business. And so in addition to the minerals, in addition to the very purposeful agenda that Canada has of saying we want investment in Canada, and that's what we're saying at Invest in Canada. We're targeting that investment and we're being extremely purposeful about who we're going after. We're not going after yesterday's economy. We're going after tomorrow's economy in a very purposeful, diligent way where we target somebody, we talk to them, we talk about where they can go in Canada, and we are looking at opportunities across the country in a very creative, innovative way. And we are landing those investments and building communities right across the country as a result.
What are the challenges that foreign investors are telling you that they have in coming to Canada? Where do we need to do better? Sure. What should we be looking at?
So I know it's a topic that you and I have talked about before. I think one of the areas we need to do better on is certainty. We need to get stuff built, and we are getting things built. If you've been to see the site at Windsor, if you've been out to Loyalist and seen Umicore, we are getting things built. But companies need to know, when can I be up and running? They have made commitments. They need to supply their product to their ultimate buyer. And so regulatory regimes, ensuring that we have clarity as to approvals, that we work collaboratively, the province and the federal government, to get those approvals done. Those are important things because time is money and business needs to know when they're going to get it done. I am really, really seeing an absolute desire not to cut any corners. We're not going to cut corners when it comes to our environmental protections and what we need to do, but we can do it more efficiently. And we're really seeing that effort be driven. That was a statement in the budget, and we're seeing that come to action, I think, on very specific files that are our priorities.
Yeah. As Laurel mentioned, both she and I hail from the East Coast. You live there now. I used to live there. And Minister Anand, of course, was born there. So you can see that there's a lot of Nova Scotia running through here. But I had breakfast this morning with Premier King from PEI. And he said something interesting because he was talking about attracting investment. And what he said was, in the past, it used to be companies would come to PEI and say, how much of a wage subsidy can you give me in order to relocate? But he said now, The questions are, what's your childcare like? Can I get a doctor for my employees? How's the connectivity in terms of transportation? And do we have access to labor? Are you hearing this in the worldwide as well? Have we changed that much? It's no longer about dollars and cents. It's about the quality of life.
Absolutely. And I just had a chance to spend a week in PEI visiting businesses and talking to the partners in that ecosystem to attract investment. And it is amazing the work, a groundbreaking work that is already happening in PEI. And Premier King and I have been talking about, how we can attract even more. But you're absolutely right. One, we need to pay attention to what's already taking place in communities across Canada and tell those stories. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do. Make that be part of the value proposition. Understand that, for example, in Charlottetown, PEI, an mRNA vaccine for farmed fish is groundbreaking. And we should be telling that story and using that as a mechanism to say, you should come here because look what's already happening here. Be part of this ecosystem. So I agree. Lots of great stories and lots of great opportunity. And we can't underestimate the immigration strategy that Canada has of being a welcoming jurisdiction, that makes companies know they'll get their workforce.
Yeah, the Atlantic pilot really has worked for them. Let's flip out to Alberta and Saskatchewan. Clearly, Invest Canada is a federal entity. You represent coast to coast. You have to work with different jurisdictions in different provinces, but I see that you travel to each and every one of these provinces and you are meeting with all of these governments. What's the response?
The response has been really positive. As I said, I grew up in Saskatchewan, Alberta, lived in Quebec, was here in Ontario, moved to Nova Scotia, have another house in PEI. So I spend a lot of time across the country, and I really believe in the opportunity that we can't have a one-size-fits-all out of Ottawa. And I know that you knew that from your life in Nova Scotia when you got to Ottawa. And sometimes in our federal entities, we kind of forget the differences across the country. And my mission in this new role has really been to say, listen, I'm going to, we are going to work with you to bring forward transformative investments for your part of the world. So in Alberta, we've been having those conversations. CCUS is a big part of it. Hydrogen is a big part of it. Dow is having its net zero cracker in Alberta. We've got BHP in Saskatchewan building the world's largest project. And so those pieces, I think, are critical. By getting out, talking and saying, we're here to partner with you, to work with you, because at the end of the day, we want every part of Canada to be strong and we want every Canadian to have opportunity.
One of the things, you mentioned ESG already, but one of the things that we have to keep in the back of our minds is we need to grow our economy. We want to attract foreign investment, but we also want to manage our carbon. So tell me a little bit about sustainable investing and the approach that Invest Canada is taking.
So our focus is exclusively on those new industries. So I'll use an example in Manitoba, because we haven't talked about Manitoba. Raitt, for example, is an alternative protein company. And so that part of Canada has a big, significant strategy with respect to alternative protein. That's a piece of the puzzle as well, right? How do we get protein on the plates around the world that is a lower carbon, moving to net zero? So we really have a significant focus in terms of those lenses where we are driving the agenda. Green steel. That's another great example. We want to build these vehicles. We need green steel. We need green components to all the battery manufacturers. So as I said, we're very purposeful, working with our partners in the federal government, determining, we have strategies, minds to mobility. How do you bring that to life? And that is a key piece of really looking at who are these companies. And we're looking at those companies who share our values in terms of tackling climate, doing things in a net zero way. And that's what we need to do because that builds tomorrow's industry instead of yesterday's industry.
Any innovations out there or trends that you can point to that kind of show that we talked about how investors are thinking differently in terms of whether or not to make the decision to go to a certain country? Anything innovation wise that you can tell us about?
Well, I get the privilege to walk through, a couple of weeks ago, we were in Norway. We think about Northvolt in Sweden, right? As an example, we were talking to other companies in Norway that have that similar, very building what we need to power our economy, to power our lives in a way that doesn't negatively impact the planet. And so those innovations that are around the world and that are in Canada as well, we're looking to match those together and to really say Canada has what the world is looking for the net zero transition. We have the minerals, we have the people, we have the green energy, and we have the desire and the willingness, because Canada hasn't just come to this concept of we need to, drive a net zero agenda. We didn't wake up yesterday and say, this is new for us. We've been on this road for a while, and it's not been easy. Absolutely. And I think about, Alberta as an example. If you think about those groups, and I know many are here today who have been part of the oil and gas industry in Alberta, who are now embracing and working aggressively to say, we need to have this be a net zero source of energy, and we need to use our resources wisely, and we need to do in a way that, has a positive impact on the planet. Those are big transitions that have happened. Transitions are never easy, but I think that there's a willingness and a desire at all levels of government and in communities and in the private sector to drive that agenda.
So I know you're well aware of politics, so I'm going to delve in. It's not political in nature. However, so Stellantis and the battery deals, they incorporate a massive public investment, both federally and provincially here in Ontario. And sometimes opposition will say, justify the amount. Do we really need to spend that much money? So Laurel, justify the amount. Tell us why we need to do this.
So incentives are part of the puzzle, but I would say I think it's really important for, citizen Canadians, those in the audience here today, to understand they're one piece. They're one part of the puzzle. At Invest in Canada, we have significant conversations about all of the other things, and our partners in government are the negotiator of that incentive. So I can't speak to, why a certain number was landed, but what I can say is that we need to invest in our own economy. We need to see the jobs created here, and we need to compete and continue to build those communities out. In terms of, if you talk, and we've had extensive conversations with LG as an example. The LG side was really, we know what has transpired in communities in other parts of the world where they have built their made those significant investments. The supply chain starts to come, it builds out, and you see the investment, and you see the opportunity, the coordination with the academic institutions as well, and you really feel the strength of an ecosystem. That's what we had historically with our traditional auto sector. And so I think, if you're looking at that reality, if you don't improve, it's like anything else. If you don't invest in your business, if you don't fix the roof of your house, it's not going to be there anymore. And so I think we're at a time of transition where we need to put shoulder to the wheel to get those foundational marquee kind of anchor tenants to some extent. And then we need to build out the rest of the ecosystem. And that's what we're doing now.
And in your job, are you leveraging the trade attaches in our embassies around the world?
Well, absolutely. And, one of the things I didn't talk about, and that is a significant part of our Canada's value proposition, is that we're a free trading nation. We have agreements, with, every part of the world, 51 countries, and that does set us apart, because you can come to Canada and you're not saying you're going to sell only to Canadians. You're going to come here and sell from here your alternative protein, your battery, your hydrogen, whatever it might be, and sell it to the rest of the world. And so Canada is also positioning ourselves as the ability to be the provider of the solutions to the world as the world transitions to a net zero economy.
Okay. And I want to ask you about your supply chain. So you pick out you pick out a company that you want to target. You pick out a target, you go and speak to them. They're really interested. You bring them to Canada. What do you do then? Because you're not the funding entity. As you said, you step back when the negotiations happen. So where do they go from there?
So we act as, you could call it a concierge. I say that we're the troubleshooters. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, if you think about those big successes with Northvolt, LGS, let's not deceive ourselves. They were on and off the rails a few times, right? And that really is our job, to get the interest into Canada and to begin the dialogue of, here's what you would find in Canada. Here's where you could go in Canada. We take them across the country. We show them where those sites could be. We would work with our partners. Listen, FDI, investment attraction, is a team sport. And we work with the communities at a municipal level. We work with the provinces, our provincial partners, and we work with our other federal partners. And so we would be both identifying where you can go, what are the things, the advantages, what is the value proposition that we're putting forward, and then getting answers to your questions. Because sometimes it's not about the money. It's about, what is your regulation in Canada? Will I be able to do what I want to do? Will I be able to, locate where I want to locate? So there's lots of those pieces in making that decision. You think about it when you're buying a house, how many things you look at and how many questions you might have. And you're investing multi-billions of dollars. And sometimes your biggest investment you've ever made in North America, you're going to have a lot of questions, and we're there to help them get the answers so that they ultimately can make a decision. And more often than not, we're successful in seeing them come to a community near you in Canada.
Amazing. And as we close out, I just want to make sure that we've covered every province and territory in the country, because you cover them all up. So we talked about Newfoundland, we talked about Nova Scotia, New Brunswick and the Northwest Territories, and Yukon and Nunavut. Anything going on there that you can highlight quickly?
Well, for sure. So I know in New Brunswick, we've been recently working with some folks where we're seeing significant investments in the aerospace and defense, and the Northwest Territories and Northern Canada. They will also be having their moment. When you look at the critical minerals maps and you see where those needed resources are, and why do people want to get those resources from Canada? They want them in an ESG friendly jurisdiction. They want them in a conflict-free jurisdiction. And so it's, I think, a really unique opportunity for us in a reconciliation, a sort of the economy, reconciliation and driving an agenda where we include our communities, our Indigenous communities, in that successful opportunity. But it's going to be all hands on deck, because these are remote communities and we need to do capacity building. So again, not only us, but these are the things that Invest in Canada that we're thinking about and talking about and meeting with Indigenous leaders across the country to see opportunity in more than just our urban centers right across our country.
Yeah, I often say that the road to the electorate actually runs through our big cities, but the road to Canada's prosperity runs through the small towns.
That's a very great line. And it is true. And those communities need to be places where there's a workforce today, there's a workforce tomorrow. And what I like about, the roles that we are securing here in Canada is that they are good, well-paying jobs. They are, these factories, it is not the factories of old. They are essentially like laboratories. You're running a computer. These are jobs that you can raise a family on. You can choose to live in a community. And that is, at the end of the day, you're a mom. I'm a mom. Why did we did the work that we did and do the work that we do now? We're trying to leave a better future for our kids, and we want them to have opportunity. Whatever they want to do, we want them to have that opportunity. And that's really what we're about. I think at Invest in Canada, we're in the opportunity business, going to seeing a significant employer come into a community that will be a great employer, that will be a great community builder. And that's why we are so purposeful and targeted in who we start to talk to and who we try to attract to Canada.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that we're running close to our time, but I wanted to get, and it's not something that we actually talked about, that we were going to talk about, but you've touched on Indigenous. And I think that's a really important topic for us to consider when we think about energy transition, when we think about our future economy. And I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of Invest Canada on this one, but what are your thoughts about the importance of something like a federal Indigenous loan guarantee?
Well, I've heard many people talk about that being a significant part of the solution that needs to come forward. And I guess what I would say is I would welcome anything that comes forward that would allow us to truly bring the communities into partnership. When I was in the Ontario government, I spent a lot of time in the far north on some tough stuff. I worked on, Crown wards and some of the very challenging things. And one of the things I always was sad about at times was a feeling that there's not, you might ask a young person, what do you want to do? What do you want to do when you grow up? And they didn't know. I don't think they saw opportunity for themselves. So I'm really excited about if we can be part of bringing opportunity into communities and having all Canadians really see a very hopeful future for themselves. And that what I think makes the fact that I have a wonderful job and I'm really motivated to get on these airplanes and travel across the country and around the world to make a difference in each and every community.
And what's your final pitch to anybody who may be a foreign direct investor out there today?
So my pitch is reach out to us. I think we can help you really understand the opportunities that exist in Canada. We can, give you the detailed value proposition and get your questions answered. And maybe translate to some extent the federal government world into the business world. I think we're a little bit of a translation services. What are you guys looking for in business, and how can we find those solutions at a federal level? So I'd welcome an opportunity to chat with you and be here for most of the day.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Laurel Broten, CEO, Invest Canada.